Down, 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 into the ground, ground, ground. Our economy keeps marching into the ground, ground, ground. Oh boy. So CNBC. This is straight off of CNBC right here. Chinese freight ship traffic to busiest U.S. ports. Los Angeles, Long Beach sees a steep drop. And you're like, yeah, but I mean, how big is the drop, right? You know, we hear about the trade war. We hear about 145% tariffs against China and China putting 125% tariffs against the United States. But what does that really look like? For the week ending May 3rd, the number of freight vessels leaving China and headed to the Southern California ports, the main U.S. ports receiving Chinese freight and other Asian trade, is down 29% week over week, according to Port Optimizer. Year over year, the data shows a 44% drop in vessels scheduled to arrive the week of May 4th through May 10th. So think about that. Think about all the products that are manufactured, assembled, whatever in China, all of those things that we receive. Shipping from China is going to be down 44% year over year. Let's see here. Quote, we are at a tipping point on the West Coast, said Ken Adamo, Chief of Data Analytics at DAT Freight and Analytics. Quote, looking at how many truckloads are available versus trucks, we've seen a precipitous drop. Over 700,000 loads have evaporated nationally in the past week compared to 2 weeks prior. 700,000 truckloads have just simply disappeared out of the economy. I'm sure that's not going to affect you though. You're a Node developer. Eli, don't you understand? I code in Node. I don't care about truckloads of nothing. So this trade war that the senile old loser has started, that we know is unsustainable, is just trucking along. I was reading one of these things from an analyst. They were saying about 3 weeks. They were saying it's about 3 weeks from the point that we start seeing shelves go empty. Because again, with supply chain, it takes a long time for things to get through the supply chain. So, you know, with these tariffs are announced, but then it takes a while for the tariffs to come. And then some tariffs don't actually come. And there's this whole mess. So right now, they're saying about 3 weeks. About 3 weeks from now, we're going to start seeing the price, the hit to the prices of things and the shelves actually starting to go bare. So yeah. Oh, Eli, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. No, I just want to be able to buy stuff. Remember that Trump official came out and basically said it's not a right for Americans to buy cheap stuff? What is it with our last couple of presidents? What does the American public complain about? They complain about inflation. Inflation is the issue. Our last administration was like, nah. And this administration is doing whatever the hell it's doing. Wouldn't it be nice if we just had one administration to actually do what people were actually complaining about? That would be ever so lovely. So anyways, this is going to be a big deal. Again, think about the technology gewgaws and gadgets. Think about the stuff that you install and that you implement. What happens to the price of your routers and your switches goes up by 145%. What happens in the price of computers goes up by X amount. What does that mean? And not just for your company, but for you. Again, the big thing to think about in the technology world is the real money. The real money is in implementations and migrations. That's where you make the bank, right? You're going out, you're deploying a whole metric crap ton of equipment. So when you deploy all that equipment, deployment just takes a lot of labor hours. Not only that, but you can pad your margins when you're selling the hardware to the customer. And basically, the deployments and migrations are where there's just a tremendous amount of money, right? Upkeep and maintenance. Not so much. Again, you need a lot of people, you need a lot of work to deploy, let's say 10,000 workstations. Once you have 10,000 workstations up and running, 5, 6, desktop support technicians can probably deal with it. Maybe 10, right? It doesn't take a lot to maintain systems. So what's going to be interesting is what happens when companies start pushing back their refresh cycles, and what happens when they really start rethinking their deployments, or not even just rethinking their deployments, they just simply can't afford deployments anymore. And again, what's that going to do? Oh, to your career? That is going to be the question. Anyways, as you may or may not know, I'm known as Eli the Computer Guy. My pride and joy currently is something called SiliconDojo.com. What if high quality technology education was simply as accessible as running water? If you go over there, we have self-study courses. So we have Python, SQL, something called the Bottle Web App Framework. I'm currently working on an Introduction to Programming series that should be done by the end of this week. We will have an Introduction to AI series that'll be working on next. We do one-on-one conversations. I do those every Monday. So actually after I record this, basically 30-minute sessions where I talk with students about getting ahead in their careers. How to cook beans. A lot of those Gen Zers don't know how to cook beans. I feel like that's going to be the thing I'm talking about for the next 6 months. I'm like, okay, Gen Zer, this is how you soak beans, and then this is how you cook them. This is how you take one beef bone, you throw it into a big old pot of soup, and that's how you can flavor an entire big pot with 50 cents of beef bone. I feel like that's what I'm going to be telling my folks for the next while. Anyways, but we do the one-on-ones, and we also do, like group sessions. So we had Director of Business Development on Friday came in for a Zoom session where students were able to ask him about business development and that type of thing. So that's all the kind of stuff that we do at SiliconDojo.com. And I come here to talk about the questions my students have or things that they should be thinking about, basically as a way to advertise SiliconDojo.com. Advertising costs a lot of money. Client acquisition costs. Client acquisition costs. Your business will live or die based off client acquisition costs. And doing these videos is dirt cheap, but for me. I do these videos. I direct people to SiliconDojo.com. I win. It's a hell of a lot better than paying AdWords. What the hell AdWords would cost nowadays? Anyways, as an aperitif, or not aperitif, aperitif comes after, as an appetizer to talking about Intel laying off 20,000 employees, we're going to talk about the layoffs that have already happened in 2025. So I've been talking about this issue for a while. Let me be clear. The senile old loser basically is destroying an economy that was already screwed up. Our economy got screwed up back in 2008, 2009, and it has never recovered. We're not technically in the Great Recession. I would argue we're in like the Great Recession era, right? Because the Great Recession, again, recession, 2 quarters of back-to-back decrease in growth or whatever, lowering growth. Obviously, that stopped back in 2009. But the issue is the ramifications of the Great Recession, basically, it just never stopped, right? A tremendous amount of money was put into our system. Interest rates were dropped to 1%. The government just started printing money and doing a lot of other stupid policies. And so frankly, we've had a broken economy since 2008. Now again, even in a broken economy, some people can make millions and millions of dollars. So it's not like some people haven't won. It's not like a generation of technology professionals haven't won during this idiocy. But I would argue that we've had problems for a long time. And again, the issue goes into like when we hit COVID. So we already had problems going into COVID. And then we hit COVID and the government really started printing money and then start handing money out to everybody. And again, it's important to understand when I get frustrated about this, to be clear, if you are a single parent and you're making under $40,000 a year in the United States and the government wanted to give you some money for padding to make sure everything was okay, so you could make sure your kid went to school and all that kind of stuff, I'm all for that. But literally, you had couples making up to $150,000 a year getting stimulus checks from the government. right? If nothing had happened, right? You were a computer person. You and your wife or your spouse were already computer people. You're already making $75,000, $80,000 a year. Nothing had happened to you. Nothing had happened to you, right? But, all told, you're making $150,000 together. Literally, you were getting stimulus checks from the government. And Pelosi came out, and when she was confronted about people making $150,000 a year, getting stimulus checks from the government, she said, well, everybody has suffered due to COVID. Yeah, that's great, but that doesn't mean the government has to print money for everybody. But we did. We're just printing money for everybody, and that was one of the issues, right? So you basically you screw up the supply chain at the exact same time you're printing money. So people that already have money now have more money than they need. Basically, they just have free money. They start spending their free money. The people that actually need to spend money, they're spending money. Supply chain's all screwed up. That's one of the reasons that inflation went through the roof. Again, 1% interest rates, and the rest of it for like housing prices. Again, just absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And so the issue, the interesting thing is we started to see the economy correct itself last year with lots and lots of layoffs, especially in the tech industry, right? Again, we saw this with Elon Musk came out and basically just eviscerated the Twitter employees, right? They just got rid of like 75% of the employees at least. And the interesting thing was after Musk did that, then everybody else did it too, right? Then Zuckerberg did it. Then Google did it. Microsoft is laying off people. Basically, once Elon Musk proved that it was okay to lay off a hell of a lot of employees, everybody else started laying off a hell of a lot of employees. And the reason is, again, what you really have to understand is most of these companies didn't need the employees that they had. Literally, I was talking to a startup founder about 2 years ago, and one of the problems he literally stated that he had was that so many of these large tech companies were hiring employees literally to take them off the table. Right? Because again, if you really think about it, right, the real competitors to Google and Microsoft and Amazon aren't Google and Microsoft and Amazon. They've got their weird thing going on, right? The real competitors to those companies are the upstarts, the ones that are going to come up out of nowhere and basically solve the problem from a 45-degree angle, a different way of looking at things. And so basically the way to make sure that there's no competition is just hire away every good candidate that might be able to support those startup companies so that they're essentially taken off the board. And literally, I was talking to a startup founder who said his number one problem was that these large big tech companies were literally just taking people off the board. Again, just hiring them, not giving them any work to do. Not giving them really any reason to work for the company, just giving them a lot of money. And what does that do, right? Removes them off the board. It also makes it look like the companies are being successful. Again, for the investors, right? You can either make money from revenue and profit or from investment. Right? Money's money. Money pays the bills. And so basically what they were doing is they were hiring these employees to make them seem more successful than they were, so that investors thought they're more successful than they were, so that investors would dump money in. Well, the things change. All of a sudden, investors don't want to see a lot of headcount anymore. They want to see efficiency, and therefore lots and lots of people start getting fired because, frankly, they were worthless, right? If a company is firing 20,000 people, ergo, most of them were literally worthless, right? And that's the issue that we're running into right now is basically as the economy changes, a lot of people in the tech world are in for a rude awakening when they realize that they're worthless. I know you're not supposed to say that. Oh, that's mean. How can you look these poor little noobs in the eye and tell them they're worthless? Well, because you are. Right? Unless there's an ROI, unless you understand the return on investment for your position to the company, you are worthless. And again, with a lot of these employees, you should be looking at about 4x, the company should be looking at about 4x return for you. So if you're somewhere around the profit center, right? There's cost centers and profit centers. Profit centers bring money to the company. If you're somewhere around the profit center, the company should be looking at getting 4x whatever your salary is. If you make $100,000 a year, the company should be making $400,000 a year from you. If you're making $500,000 a year, the company should be making $2 million a year from your work. Now, some of that's for greed and investors and all that kind of stuff, but also it goes to facilities costs and secretaries and server rooms and facilities and all that kind of thing, right? But basically, one of the things you should be thinking about as if you're an employee is, are you bringing 4x the revenue for your work, for whatever your salary is? And if the answer is no, you're probably running into a problem, right? If it's not 4x, it's like 3x, well, okay. If it's 2x, that's getting a little scary. If it's 1x, if it's not an X, then you're worthless. Just gonna put it out there. So anyways, the appetizer before we get into Intel's 20,000 layoffs is tech layoffs in 2025. Google, Microsoft, Meta, and other tech giants cut jobs amid restructuring. Let's see here. The technology sector is undergoing yet another wave of workforce reductions in 2025, following an already turbulent 2024. Let's see here. Let's see. According to data from layoff tracker platform TrueUp, 234 layoffs have already been recorded in the tech industry this year, 2025, affecting 45,656 employees, an average of 439 job losses per day. 439 of your butts are getting kicked out of the door every single day. For comparison, 2024 saw a total of 1,115 layoff incidents, with a staggering 238,461 workers affected, translating to an average of 653 daily dismissals. The job cuts reflect a strategic realignment aimed at optimizing resource allocation and enhancing profitability. Profitability, huh? Hasn't somebody been talking about that for a couple of years? Particularly in high growth segments such as AI and cloud computing. And so that's the world we're in, right? So again, when I do these meetings, I'm sure I'll get a couple of them today. There's this whole question about, how do I get a job? And so you go out there and schmooze. You go to events, you go to meetups, you go to Eventbrite events, you go to any events, you talk, you schmooze, you build things, you put crap on GitHub, and you work your ass off to get a job. Because the reality is the fantasy we were going through for about 3 or 4 years there is completely dead at this point. And the idiocy that we've been going through for about the past 15 is basically on its way to die, right? This whole, again, it's the thing that I don't understand. So I've been doing tech, again, since 1996. I started in the Army, went in the corporate world, got my MCSE back in 2000, had my own company with the 9 employees and all that, and then basically went to the YouTube world. So one of the interesting things for me is basically, my corporate and all that kind of stuff stopped at about the beginning of a lot of your careers, right? So a lot of you folks getting into the tech world and, somewhere between 2010 to 2015, you got used to normalcy. I never really got to enjoy too much, right? This world where you're pampered and people like you and they're fighting over you and you get nap pods and all of that kind of stuff. Again, when I worked in the tech world, again, it was all about ROI. If you are not bringing a return back to the company, your ass goes out the fucking door. Again, like going to a company and they had Starbucks K-Cups. That's when you're getting pampered. I come from the generation of geeks that getting Starbucks K-Cups was being pampered. And that was it. No nap pods, no quinoa salads, none of that horse crap. You just got some decent coffee out of your damn K-Cups. And so the interesting thing is, again, over the past 10 or 15 years, to see how the 1% interest rates have driven the insane investment into the tech world. And then basically it's just massively skewed everything. Again, one of the things I talk about is culture, right? Startup culture, business culture, and how fundamentally important culture is for any organization, right? And so for the companies that I worked for, the culture was about profitability, right? So everybody got hired. The idea is how are you going to make the company more profitable? How are you going to make the company more efficient? How are you going to either allow us to charge more for the widgets that we sell or allow us to sell more widgets, right? That's the give and take. That's what you're looking at. And the interesting thing is that culture in the technology world has just been devastated over the past 15 years by these 1% interest rates, because it's been more important to hire people anybody than it is to actually ship product. And this is the argument that I had back during BLM and that kind of stuff is, again, support who you want to support, fund who you want to fund, the whole 9 yards. Again, protest as much as you want to protest. But the issue that we saw, right, and you saw the complete and utter idiocy that happened in the tech industry, is where you had technology employees literally going out and protesting their company while they were getting paid. Hey guys, we're gonna go out this afternoon on company time to hold up signs and protest the company in order to decrease the company's business. Right? That's just idiocy. That's just idiocy. And then again, think about that. Think about this with company culture, right? For my generation, you're there to ship widget. The entire company culture is to ship widgets. So everybody has that same mindset. Some work harder, some are lazier. I'm not saying everybody's perfect, but people know what the hell they're doing, right? Again, imagine in this world where you have a company culture where employees believe they have the sacrosanct right to protest the company while they're getting paid ridiculous salaries by the company. And then ask yourself, how well that's going to work out. Again, look, even if you're a blue-haired socialist, even if your hair is the bluest of hairs of a socialist, right? Do you still think that system's going to work at the end of the day? Probably not. It's probably going to break down. And that's one of the things that we're seeing. And so one of the issues that we have right now with our economy is 1% interest rates are gone. The money printing is gone. These companies basically have to start focusing on profitability again, right? So we have all of these foundational problems running into 2025. And now we have a president in 2025 that, basically is deciding policy on whether or not he feels that we're all being yippee. What does yippee mean? I don't even know what yippee means. But apparently, we will either get more or less tariffs based off of how yippee he thinks we're feeling. Right? So imagine the fractures in the foundation of our society we had coming into 2025, and now you dump 145% tariffs on China. Now you dump 10 and 20% tariffs and all these different tariffs going across the world, and then you add on the taxes to any ships that were manufactured in China, and you start adding all of this kind of stuff on to the issues that we already had, and that's why the economic issues are going to be so severe. And then we go and we take a look at this. So Intel, all right? Intel is now laying off people. Intel CEO announces massive layoffs, stricter in-office mandates, and huge spending cuts. This is also concerning because, again, it goes back to the fundamental question of what the hell is our administration doing, right? So the idea is that we're going to have 145% tariffs on China to force manufacturing to come back to the United States. And again, one of the things with the manufacturing is high-tech manufacturing, chip processor manufacturing. So how funny is it? How funny is it that we have 145% tariffs against China so that we can reshore chip manufacturing? At the exact same time, we'll talk about it tomorrow, but Huawei is now coming out with AI chips as good as NVIDIA, apparently as good or near as good as NVIDIA, right? And so we have 145% tariffs against China so that we can reshore processor manufacturing. China may be very close to surpassing us in processors not too long. And one of our main processor companies is laying off not 100 employees, not 1,000 employees, 20,000 employees. Oh, this is why Eli, the computer guy, gets a migraine. This is why I just get a migraine. Let's see here. In a note to investors, Tan wrote that Intel would be streamlining its operations. That means cuts to various departments, the end of non-core products. So they're going to stop producing non-core products. That's one of the things with Intel. Intel has been failing for a long time. Again, Intel has failed long before 2025, right? They failed with 5G. They failed with their low power things. There used to be, what were those? atom chips, right? There were the atom processors. Those were supposed to compete with ARM processors, right? Atom failed, 5G failed, right? A lot of their non-core product. Again, they've been failing for a decade. And this is one of the issues we have right now, especially with this whole global trade thing, is there is that argument of, is China or is Taiwan or whatever, are they doing nefarious things to basically outcompete our companies, or do our companies suck? Right? Like China can be giving illicit government support to their high-tech sector, and our high-tech sector can be sucking donkey balls at the exact same time, right? Two things can be true. And that's one of the issues, and that's one of the things to be thinking about, right, as a technology professional, as our administration looks at trying to lock out foreign technology with the idea that you can then simply buy, American technology. One of the questions has to be, what if American technology just really sucks? What if China literally leapfrogs the United States? What if it's no longer that China is, they can produce more, they can produce en masse better, or they can produce at a lower price point? What if they can simply produce at scale, at a lower price point, a higher quality product? What happens when they start selling the equivalent of H100 GPUs for $5,000 instead of $100,000? What the hell does that do just to the entire global technology landscape? Anyways. Quote, there is no way around the fact that these critical changes will reduce the size of our workforce, said Tan. Quote, as I said when I joined, we need to make some very hard decisions to put our company on a solid footing for the future. Quote, we need to get our balance sheet healthy and start the process of deliberating this year. It's now called deliberating. Have you ever heard of the term deliberating? I've never heard of deliberating either. Apparently, the one thing that CEOs can do in the modern world is come up with new words to not say layoff, right? Because if they say layoffs, that spooks the stock market. People start selling their stock. So we're not doing layoffs, we're deliberating. And again, I know some of you folks, you think I get mean. And you think I get snarky, and I do. But it's not always me being mean and snarky. What I want you to understand with these words, like again, when I talk about the whole idea of profit versus revenue versus user growth versus vanity metrics, and one of the reasons I scream about vanity metrics and that type of thing is because the issue that we've been running into, again, for the past decade and a half with the Silicon Valley world, is they are more focused on coming up with new words than they are just getting their damn balance sheet in order. Let's stop coming up with new words and just work on your profit loss statements. More worky on profit loss statements, less worky on Grammarly. How about that? Anyways. Let's see, Tan never revealed how many workers Intel will be laying off, but previous reports suggest the number will be substantial. Bloomberg previously said the company plans to cut over 20% of its workforce, which could equate to around 20,000 employees. Tan said the cuts will affect people in the second quarter of 2025. And so that's the other thing too. Again, one of the things with a lot of the policies the current administration has is they're putting these policies out there. We're not seeing a lot of effect currently. So a lot of people think, well, it's not really that big a deal. Trump's doing what Trump is doing. If you disagree with what Trump is doing, you have TDS. But as I said before, what we saw with the Great Recession, it's the dominoes. It's the dominoes. What we saw with COVID, it's the dominoes. Basically, somebody starts wobbling a domino. Like while this domino is wobbling, it's still standing up. It's wobbling, but it's still standing up. The problem is when this domino decides to fall, then it's the next domino, then it's the next domino, then it's the next domino. Again, what happens when this domino finally falls? In 3 weeks, when we start having shelves that are empty, when companies like Intel start dumping tens of thousands of employees, when these other layoffs finally start going through, One domino hits, another domino hits, another domino hits, another domino hits. Let's see here. Intel laid off 15,000 people, around 15% of its workforce, last August as part of its cost-cutting moves. So last August, less than a year ago, they got rid of 15% of the workforce, 15,000 people. They're now going to be getting rid of 20% of the workforce, 20,000 people. So in less than a year, they're going to have dumped 35,000 employees from one company. And again, I will remind you, this one company is supposed to be one of the jewels, in our chest of technology development in the United States. This Intel is the type of company that we're supposed to be using to reshore things like technology manufacture in the United States. And they're firing 35,000 people. Eliminated another 2,000 people at several U.S. cities the following October. There have been a further 1,900 layoffs, along with 400 from Mobileye since the start of 2025. So that brings you up to about 40,000. 40,000 employees Intel has gotten rid of in the last year, as both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have talked up how we're going to be reshoring technology manufacture in the United States. Who's going to be doing, literally, who's going to be doing it? I don't know. TAN is also mandating that hybrid workers who come into the office 3 days per week increase their in-person attendance to at least 4. This will be implemented by September 1st. TAN says more in-office work promotes better engagement, collaboration, and productivity, a claim that has long been debated. And again, one of the interesting things to look at in the world of technology is in 2015, it was all about collisions, right? Why do you have 8 people working at one fucking picnic table? Because you need more collisions. And then all of a sudden COVID happens, and then everybody knows work from home is the best. Never seen anybody as a superior way of doing work. And now that's going away and everybody's returning back to the office. Let's see here. More companies are cracking down on hybrid and remote work, the most recent being Google, which told some fully remote workers to get back in the office or face termination. TAN also wants to reduce the layers of management at Intel. He said that bureaucracy is suffocating the innovation and agility that we need to win, noting that many teams are 8 or more layers deep. It was only last week when TAN overhauled Intel's leadership by installing a new CTO and AI lead. Other internal changes TAN is implementing include fewer unnecessary meetings, reducing the numbers of attendees, and ensuring less administrative work at Intel. Intel also revealed during its earnings call that its Intel 7 processor node production capacity was facing shortages, something it predicted would, quote, persist in the foreseeable future. The situation arose due to an unexpected surge in demand for its N1 and N2 products. So there you go. Intel is dumping tens of thousands of more employees, at least because, they've got to worry about things like profitability. Again, this is a big thing for you to be thinking about. I was talking to my buddy the other day, and it was interesting. I had to be careful. I had to be careful in the real world. So I was talking to my buddy, and he was talking about work. And he was like, yeah, one of the problems he's having right now is so many people are asking him for updates on his work. So he's sitting there and he does the code, and then he just keeps getting pinged about these updates for his work. And I looked at him. I was like, well, that's weird. Don't you guys have like a work tracking system or whatever? And he's like, yeah, we've got Jira. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's kind of funny, right? Because that's supposed to be the thing. Don't bug your coders. Don't bug your line employees. Just look at the tracking system and see what's going on there. If you need a specific, bug them. But let them stay in the zone is the idea. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And he's like, yeah. And then I looked at him. I was like, so is that normal? Have they always bugged you like that about what you've been doing? And he was like, no, they didn't used to do this. And then I was like, oh. It's like, oh. And then he said, oh. And I was like, oh. All right. And then I shut up. Because I didn't want to say anything else. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing for you folks to be thinking about. Again, especially a lot of you folks that are actually in the technology world, that actually have technology jobs, to realize the dominoes are falling. Right? This is actually, in fact, happening. This has been happening for a while, and there is going to be a massive question on what the future looks like. Again, that's the thing I talk about with the dot-com bust, right? When the dot-com bust, again, when I was 24 years old, flying all over the country, I should not have been hired for that job. Let me be clear. Nobody should have fucking hired me for that job. I was so unqualified for that job. It is just, wow. But I got hired because there was such a demand. But when the bubble burst, right, the dot-com bubble burst, then they wouldn't hire anybody. So after I had the experience, after I had the certifications, after I had all of that, people refused to hire because they had been so burned previously by hiring too many idiots. That they didn't want to hire even when they needed to hire people. Again, one of the arguments that I've had for a while now with the tech industry is I think we plateaued in 2016, 2017. I've said this for a long time. I think we had enough technology professionals back in 2016, 2017, or at least IT professionals. Materials engineers, right? I think we need more engineers probably. But IT folks, we have enough. We just do, right? So much of the growth was of companies literally taking people off the board. Again, we see this with Google right now, right? So Google, basically, it was found that non-compete clauses that Google was having their employees sign were considered illegal. So the idea is if Google hires you for a position in AI, let's say, and then you leave, you had a non-compete clause, so you couldn't go to another company and work on AI or whatever, right? That was one of the ways Google tried to, and Amazon, all that, try to protect themselves. Well, that was shown to be illegal. And so one of the interesting things that's happening right now is a lot of AI employees. Google is literally hiring AI employees to sit on their ass. They don't need the AI employees. They just need them to be the fuck off the board. They need to make sure that Amazon doesn't get them, or Microsoft doesn't get them, or the next startup company doesn't get them. And so since they can't use non-compete clauses, what they're doing is they're literally hiring these employees and then just having them twiddle their damn thumbs. Do whatever the hell you want to do. Make your $500,000 a year. Don't bug us. Oh yeah, we'll get around to telling you what your chain of command is at some point, right? Anyways, right? That's actually happening. I think that's one of the big things, one of the big pushes, in the tech world for the past 5, 6, 8 years at this point, is so many of these companies were just hiring. Again, that's where in the startup world, I've talked about this. I was listening to this one investor, and again, the numbers are about what I've heard from other people, but basically he said he invested in 60 companies. The idea was to invest in 60 companies, and out of 60 companies, there would be 2 home runs, there might be 10 adequate companies, and essentially the rest would fail. Think about how much money this one investor was putting on the table just to get his 2 home runs, right? 60. So if you put $100,000 on the table per investment, that's $6 million at least just to get your 2 home runs. And again, these startups need more money than $100,000. So he's putting lots and lots and lots of money on the table. Again, but think about this. That means 40 startup companies were essentially worth us. 40 startup companies of founders and employees were essentially worthless, but getting funded, or no, 50, I suppose. It'd be 50. Anyways, a lot, right? Just with the hope that they might be, get a home run somehow. They're doing something people didn't expect would actually be valuable. But think about again, and that's one investor. Think about how many investors were out there making bets the same type of way. They're just throwing money into the tech world, just hoping basically they would hit the jackpot on somebody. It really isn't investment anymore. It's more like things like sports gambling. So it's not quite like roulette. Like roulette is gambling, but basically they're doing more like sports gambling, where they do their research, they understand the players, they understand the game, they understand the field, but then based off of that, then they play 60 bets, and then with the idea that 2 would pay off. But think about this. That means, and again, this is where you should be very nervous, your job, your 6-figure salary, your mortgage, your kid's private school is being paid for by gambling. Or maybe that's incorrect. It was being paid for by gambling. How does that make you feel? So be curious. It'll be curious what's going to happen in the next few months. Again, the fractures are already there. You know, that one thing was already saying, 260,000 layoffs last year, 45,000 layoffs already this year. Intel getting rid of 20,000 more. We're going to see more and more of those layoffs. Those layoffs are just those are just table stakes. This level of layoff in the tech world at this point is table stakes. And then once we see the ramifications of the senile old losers trade war really start hammering our economy, then everything is going to get worse from there. So what's the advice? Eli, we want advice. You want advice. The big thing that I have you think about is looking at your position in your company and asking yourself, what is the company's return on investment for you? Are they making 4x whatever your salary is? If you make $100,000 a year, how are they making 400 grand off of you? If you cannot answer that question, figure that question out, right? If you realize your position doesn't bring money to the company, but there are positions in the company that do bring money to the company, I would recommend you go and try to get transferred into one of those positions. Again, you don't want to work for Tadum. Tadum, you know Tadum? Nobody knows Tadum. That's where they put all the black people. It's sad, but it's true. It's only funny because it's true, right? Netflix decided they were going to hire black people. But, you know, empowerment, that's kind of difficult and time consuming. Actually finding skilled employees, that's a pain in the ass. So they just dumped them into the Tadum department, right? So there was Tadum. So Tadum was like their blog, their like social media presence to talk about the new shows coming out on Netflix that nobody cares about. You find out what shows are on Netflix when you open up Netflix and you see what the new shows are. Again, there's nothing interesting about these shows. I mean, they're just AI slop. Netflix had AI slop before we knew what AI slop was. So anyways, they just dump all the black people into Tadum. This is true. And then when their stock took a beating about a year and a half ago or whatever, one of the things they did was eliminate Tadum. All the black people got fired. And then they called it racist. That's racist. Like, well. Oh, this is where it all gets very messy. So one of the things to ask yourself is, you know, do you work essentially in the Tadum, metaphorical Tadum of your company? If you do, get the hell out. Find another job there. Another thing to be thinking about is actually figure out what the hell your company does. Again, one of the interesting things that I find being here in Asheville is chock-a-block full of tech employees. And this is a lived experience thing. I haven't really been around like employees for a long time. I'm usually around, you know, business people and founders and other people with fever dreams, that type of deal, not necessarily employees. And what's kind of curious here, we've got all of these tech employees. And again, like to be a tech employee is an entirely different mindset than being in the business world, like really being in the business world, entrepreneurship or whatever else. One of the fascinating things I've found is I've talked with people, with friends of mine, who are in in their jobs, and I basically asked them things like, well, you know, how does your company make money? What does the profit margin looks like? What is the sales process? That type of thing. Not deep stuff. But again, what are your main lines of products? You know, what is the revenue of your main lines of products? Those type of deals. One of the interesting things is no clue, no fucking clue. Like, how do you have no clue? How do you have no clue what the lines of revenue of the company you work for are? Well, they don't. They just simply don't. And so one of the things I would recommend for you folks is to go out and find out what the hell the lines of revenue for your company is, to figure out how stable you think your company is going into this idiocy that we're going into. Do you have, you know, an electricity, a sewer pipe type company that everybody needs regardless, or is this an extra that people are willing to dump when the going gets tough? I mean, this is something that you really need to be thinking about now. And then the next thing you need to be thinking about is both for in your position in the company and as for you as a technology professional is actually sitting down and solidifying your position. You know, one of the things to be thinking about, you know, when times are flush with tech companies, again, all these happy people, you know, these happy people in the tech world, and they look at me and they just give me shit. Oh, Eli, you're not a real technology professional. You're mean and snarky. It's like, yeah, because I came from a generation of technology professionals where we supported end users, and if we screwed up, lots and lots of people got hurt. Lots of people risk being laid off if I fucked up the server, right? One of the reasons you get stressful, one of the reasons you get snarky, right? We have a whole generation. We have a generation of technology professionals that have literally lost the grasp of the idea that their work matters. Really, fundamentally matters, right? So one of the things to think about, again, in the flush times, it's really easy to not do the work that needs to be done. Again, things like documentation. How up to date is your documentation? And it's not just if you get fired, right? Imagine you're on a team of 8 people. If you're on a team of 8 people, 2 can go away tomorrow. I can guarantee you 2 can get fired tomorrow and you'll still have your workload. Right? So one of the things to be looking at is get your documentation up to speed. Be the person who focuses on documentation, right? You got a team, sit down and document everything out while you still have your entire team. Yes, I know creating documentation sucks. You know what's worse than creating documentation? Have two of your teammates go away and not knowing what the hell it is that they did, right? Locking down things like documentation, going to your bosses, going to your managers and asking them right at this point in time, what is actually valuable to them, right? When your managers go to the C-level executives, or if they're the executives, right, they have numbers they have to hit. They have metrics they have to hit. They have ways that they need to prove that their departments are actually providing value to the company. So one of the things to do is go to your boss and ask them, what numbers do they need? Right? Maybe the numbers is things like work orders, right? Look, we need as many work orders or as many tasks solved as possible. So you know what? If you tell me you need as many tasks solved as possible, this is not the time for me to rip apart a couple servers and get them up to speed. This is the time to go in and clean out all the email problems or clean out the little performance problems, right? Because that's the thing, right? You got a whole chunk of relatively small, easy to solve problems that will improve things for the company. And then you've got this just mass of long, tedious, slog work that needs to be done, right? If right now the company is looking at doing layoffs and your boss says, look, I just need you guys processing as many tasks as possible, right? Then hit that never-ending list of small tasks just to show that the department is actually doing the work. So when they go and they show those numbers, they're like, look, my people are clearing, 10 tasks, 20 tasks, whatever per day. I can't let any of them go, right? That's the kind of metric your boss is gonna need, right? Do they need, maintenance done, or do they need to ship new products, right? Look, right now, we need to close the next investment round. One of the things with closing the new investment round is we need to show that we're pushing out new products. Maybe that's a thing. And so if the company needs to show that they're pushing out new products for the investors, again, now is not the time to rip apart the old servers and optimize them. This is the time to slap some fucking new products together and ship those damn things out together. But Eli, I would never ship a duct tape product out the door. Oh, are you telling me as my employee that when I'm informing you that this is what the investors are looking for, I need to get investor money in order to pay you, you're telling me you would not do what I'm asking you to do because that's below your professional ethics? Yeah, I would never ship a half-assed duct tape product out the door. I would never do that. Great, you're fired. What? The boss is telling you what they need done. You want to be a fucking smart ass. Great, use your brains and learn how to make bean soup. Stone soup. Have you ever heard the thing of stone soup? You get to learn how to make stone soup. Anyways, that type of thing. And then the other thing I'd be looking at too, again, from a personal, professional standpoint, is making sure your skills are up to snuff. All right, if you've had a good job, for the past 10 years, doing Ruby on Rails, right? Again, whatever job pays you, do it. I'm pretty technology agnostic. Again, I just hate JavaScript. I passionately hate JavaScript, but that's just me. That's just me, right? But anything else, I'm pretty agnostic on, right? I'm not snarking on you for knowing Ruby on Rails, being a Ruby on Rails professional. But think about this. As we go into this economic idiocy, is this the time that you might want to learn JavaScript? Is this the time you might want to learn Node.js or Python or AI or something else? Actually get your skills and your resume up to snuff. When you sit there and you look at your resume, does your resume look like something that's appropriate for 2025 or does it look like something that's appropriate for 2020? Right? And if so, if it looks like it's 5 years behind, again, go and start boning up on things, working on side projects. So again, if you do get laid off, or if layoffs are coming to your company, maybe you can lateral over, do that type of thing. These are the types of things that I would really think about, again, as a professional right now, because again, this is going to be a crap show. Delano or whatever. Anyway, there's one of these billionaires out there that, thinks what we're going into might be worse than a depression. And I think it's possible. Again, it's fascinating. So I read history. So in the morning, during the day, I read history. And at night, I read Dresden Files. Anyways, right? Oh, I just read a book on the Armenian genocide. That was so fun. Anyways, but the curious thing is, like, when you look at history and you look at business, you look at recessions, you look at depressions, the most screwed up thing, and this is the problem that really needs to get solved. You really want the $1 trillion problem, the $1 trillion problem. The issue with recessions and depressions and all this kind of stuff isn't actually manpower. It isn't actually resources. Isn't it actually demand, right? Resources are there, demand's there, manpower's there, everything is there, other than money, right? Money's the protocol that we use to facilitate transactions. And so that's the financial system, right? The people that make money move by hook or by crook, right? Investments, loans, profit, right? All of that kind of stuff. So basically, we have this entire system of money. And so money, the financial system, is the protocol that we use to basically make society continue moving forward. And so the issue you have with recessions and depressions and worse, again, isn't demand. People still need fed. They still need houses. They still need that stuff. It's not resources. We've still got all the resources. We've still got factories. We've still got mines. We've still got oil wells and that kind of stuff. It's not manpower. We've still got the same number of human beings. The problem is when the financial system comes to a halt, we don't have a backup protocol. We don't have out-of-band management for our systems, right? If the financial protocol fails. And so the concerning thing is when we look at the idiocy that's currently happening, not only are there tariffs, so tariffs are tariffs, that is whatever, but it's breaking down the trust. It's breaking down, again, the willingness for different parties to want to communicate. Again, when you have the senile old loser talking about turning Canada into the 51st state, right? So we may have a trade imbalance with Canada. We're now going to have tariffs on Canada. But you start talking about Canada being the 51st state, right? That angers the population to the point they don't want to do business with us. Again, even if it causes them pain, I would rather suffer a little pain versus give this jackass a dime, right? Again, you look at the Chinese folks, you look at China. Again, it's really interesting. The current book I'm reading right now talks about the Americans' relationship with China for the past 200 and some odd years. And again, look, China's dealt with 2 opium wars, right? Again, go read the opium wars. Read about the opium wars, and then decide how much China wants to deal with any of our horse crap, right? You have the opium wars, especially with Japan. You have the gunship diplomacy with Admiral Perry. You have a lot of other stuff out there, right? Again, China's been nice for a long time, but they have every right to give the Western world the double middle finger, right? Like the fact that the Western world pretends to be on this moral high horse about, yes, we're so enlightened on how to deal with humanity. Except when it comes to brown people. Except when it comes to brown people, right? And so again, what happens when China just gets pissed with the United States? What happens when it goes beyond tariffs? What happens when it goes beyond that kind of like economic policy just to a visceral anger? Again, think about this now. Like when you hear about U.S. military posturing, you know, we have aircraft carriers sailing, you know, off the shores of China. We have spy aircraft that are flying right outside the Chinese borders. We have something called the X-band radar in Korea that can see into China. We have what is called under the Obama administration, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Obama, right? It's called the Pacific Pivot. We militarily pivoted our entire military apparatus to point at China. Right? There's a big thing right now, the new the stealth fighter that's coming out, the Raider B-21 Raider or something, whatever it's called. Anyways, there's this whole question about whether or not, you know, it will be able to strike targets inside of China. Like, think about this. And again, you open up the news, you watch the news, right? Whether it's TV or what, right? How often do you hear about our politicians talking about our capacity to strike the Chinese homeland, to slaughter the Chinese, right? If our president feels threatened, our president feels that we have the right to slaughter Chinese people because we're a little bit nervous. And again, go back and read some damn history and you might understand why Chinese people might be a little concerned about this. And at the same time, day after day, you hear about our ability to hit the Chinese homeland. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you heard about China's capability to hit the American homeland? When was the last time you heard about a Chinese bomber that could fly from China and strike LA? When was the last time you heard about a Chinese aircraft carrier patrolling right outside our waters or whatever and sending up spy planes? Right? They put up a balloon that flew over the U.S. Again, that was bad. We should have dealt with it. But one spy balloon over the United States, and our political class loses their damn mind. At the exact same time, for decades, we have been pushing our military power against China, right? And so the question then does become, what happens if they are willing to suffer the loss not to deal with us anymore? What happens if they take their toys and go home? What happens if other countries, again, European countries, other countries, decide it's not worth this crap? So not only do you have the normal financial system breakdown, but then you actually have the will of the people not wanting the financial system to be repaired. And so that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm pondering. That's why I'm curling up in a ball at night and sucking on my thumb, going, "Oh, mommy, tell me I'm in the wrong timeline. Tell me American Chavez is going to pop out of the wall and drag me to the timeline I'm supposed to be in." Anyways. So yeah, some things to think about. Intel's laying off 20,000 more people. In a year, they will have laid off approximately 40,000 people. Already, 45,000 technology professionals have been laid off in 2025. Last year, it was like 250 or 50,000, something like that. And that is the baseline we're starting at before the full ramifications of Trump's policies hit. So anyways, some things to think about. So that's all I got. See y'all later.